Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. I never thought a simple day at work could leave me so shaken, so uncertain of how to process what had just unfolded. My boss, a man I had respected for years, asked me for a favor, something so unexpected that it left me staring at him in silence, unsure if I had heard him correctly. It wasn't the kind of favor people usually ask in passing. It was personal, heavy with meaning, and it demanded more from me than I thought I had to give. I remember that morning clearly. The office was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every sound echo a little too loudly. The hum of the printer, the tapping of my keyboard, the distant ring of a phone, each one seemed exaggerated. Outside my window, the sky was dull, a mixture of grey clouds and faint sunlight breaking through in patches. It was the kind of day that made you want to wrap yourself in a blanket rather than face endless paperwork. I was sipping lukewarm coffee when he walked past my desk. His expression was different, not the usual focused look he carried when moving from meeting to meeting. He looked distracted, almost burdened. Our eyes met for a split second, and in that look, I could tell something was wrong. He gave a small nod, then disappeared into his office. A few moments later, my phone rang. It was his assistant, asking me to step into his office when I had a moment. My heart skipped, though I couldn't explain why. His office always carried the same smell, freshly polished wood mixed with the faint scent of his aftershave. The shelves were lined with books that looked more decorative than read, and the large window behind his desk overlooked the city streets below. I closed the door gently, and he motioned for me to sit down across from him. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice softer than usual. "I need to ask you for something, and I hope you'll understand." Those words alone were enough to make my palms sweat. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together as if rehearsing the right way to say it. I watched him carefully, noticing the lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped slightly. He wasn't the confident, unshakable man I had known for years. At that moment, he seemed almost human. "I don't usually bring personal matters into work," he continued, "but I don't know who else to turn to. You've always struck me as someone who listens, really listens, and I need that right now." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. There was a vulnerability in his voice that I had never heard before. He told me about something weighing heavily on him, something that had kept him up at night. He spoke slowly, carefully, as though each word had been bottled up for too long. The favor he asked wasn't about work, money, or anything inappropriate. It was about trust. He wanted me to be there for him in a way that went beyond professional boundaries, but not in the way many would assume. He needed a confidant, someone who could hold his worries without judgment, someone who could remind him he wasn't alone in the world. At first, I was stunned. Why me? Why would a man who had so many connections, so many people around him, choose me of all people? My silence must have stretched too long because he smiled faintly, almost apologetically. "You don't have to answer right away," he said. "I know it's unusual, and I don't want you to feel pressured. I trust you." Those words landed in my chest like a weight. Trust. It was such a simple word, but it carried so much. I felt torn between the safety of keeping our relationship strictly professional and the pull of stepping into something deeper, something that might change how I saw him forever. I glanced around his office, suddenly noticing details I had overlooked 100 times before: the framed photo of his family on the shelf, the stack of reports untouched at the corner of his desk, the faint smudge on the glass window where the city's light filtered in. Everything seemed sharper, more alive, because of the choice hanging between us. Finally, I spoke. My voice came out softer than I intended. "I don't know what to say, but I hear you. And I want to help." Relief washed over his face. His shoulders eased, and for the first time since I had entered the room, he allowed himself a real smile. Not the practiced, professional one, but something genuine, touched with gratitude. We sat in silence for a while after that, the air between us filled with something unspoken. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't tense. It was different. Like we had stepped onto new ground neither of us expected to find. When I finally left his office, the world outside looked different. The grey sky seemed lighter, the noise of the city less harsh. I carried with me not just his request, but the knowledge that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who secretly carry the heaviest burdens. I walked back to my desk with a quiet resolve. I didn't know exactly what this favor would demand of me in the days to come, but I knew one thing for sure: my life and my view of him would never be the same again, and that was only the beginning. The next few days after that conversation felt strangely heavy, as though every glance, every word exchanged between us carried a layer of meaning I hadn't noticed before. I went about my work as usual: emails, reports, the small daily routines that kept the office running smoothly, but underneath it all was the quiet awareness of what he had asked me. He hadn't brought it up again directly. Instead, there were subtle moments, little pauses where our eyes met longer than necessary, or the way he'd check in on me, almost like he wanted to make sure I was still there, still willing. His tone with me had shifted too. He spoke softer, slower, as if I had become someone important, someone he could lean on without fear. One afternoon, the office was buzzing with the usual hum of meetings and chatter when his assistant stopped by my desk. "He'd like to see you again," she said, her voice casual, though her eyes lingered a second too long, almost curious. I walked down the hall with measured steps, my heart quietly racing. This time, when I entered his office, he wasn't behind his desk. Instead, he stood by the window, looking out over the city. His back was slightly hunched, his hands in his pockets, and I could see the tension in the way he held himself. "Close the door," he said softly, not turning around. I did as he asked, the quiet click of the door sounding louder than it should have. He stayed silent for a moment before finally speaking. "I've been thinking about what I said," he began, his voice carrying that same weight as before. "About the favor I asked of you. I don't want you to misunderstand. It isn't about crossing boundaries. It's about finding someone who sees me, not just the position I hold." I stepped closer, careful with my words. "I understand. And I haven't stopped thinking about it either." He turned then, and I could see the exhaustion in his face. The strong, decisive boss that everyone admired seemed almost fragile. It startled me, but it also pulled at something deep inside. For years, I had only seen one side of him: the leader, the man who made the tough calls, who never faltered. But here, behind closed doors, was someone human, someone flawed, someone reaching out. "I've spent so much of my life being the one others depend on," he confessed, lowering himself into the chair near the window. "But when I go home, it's quiet. Too quiet. The world thinks I have everything, but truthfully, I don't know how to ask for help. I don't know how to let someone in." The raw honesty in his words caught me off guard. I felt my throat tighten, and before I knew it, I had taken the seat across from him. "You've given so much to everyone else," I said carefully. "Maybe it's time you allow yourself to be on the receiving end. That's not weakness. That's courage." His eyes softened, and he leaned back, studying me as though trying to decide whether he could truly trust me with this part of himself. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable, it was filled with unspoken understanding. We began to talk more freely then, about things beyond work. He shared memories of his childhood, stories about how he built his career, even moments of failure he had never admitted to anyone else. I listened, fully present, offering not advice but simple presence, the kind that lets someone know they are not invisible. At one point, he paused and chuckled softly. "You must think it's strange, hearing all this from me of all people." I shook my head. "No. I think it's real. And maybe that's what you've been needing, someone to remind you that you don't have to carry everything alone." Something shifted then. The man who had always seemed untouchable allowed himself to be vulnerable, and I realized that the favor he asked wasn't just about him. It was about me too. In being trusted, I felt a sense of purpose, a connection that went beyond the walls of the office. As the hours slipped by, I noticed the light outside his window fading, the golden glow of the setting sun casting long shadows across the room. Time had disappeared in our conversation. When I finally stood to leave, he didn't stop me, but his voice carried after me, low and sincere: "Thank you. I didn't realize how much I needed this until now." Walking back through the quiet halls, I felt something stirring inside me. It wasn't romance. It wasn't anything inappropriate. It was deeper, a recognition that life had just opened a door to a chapter one never expected. He had trusted me with his truth, and in doing so, he had reminded me of something I had long forgotten, that even in the most unlikely places, connections can grow that change the way we see ourselves and others. And that realization stayed with me long after I turned off my desk light and stepped into the cool night air, carrying his words like a secret only I could hold. The following weeks felt unlike anything I had ever experienced in my professional life. It wasn't that my work changed, my tasks were the same, the routine predictable. What changed was the atmosphere between us. Every time I saw him in the hallway or passed him during meetings, there was this unspoken understanding, a thread connecting us that no one else could see. He didn't always call me into his office. Sometimes it was as simple as catching my eye across a crowded room, a brief nod that carried more meaning than words. Other times, he'd ask me to stay a few minutes late after everyone had gone. Those quiet conversations became our sanctuary. One particular evening stands out in my memory. The office had emptied, the distant sounds of traffic filling the silence. I was gathering my things when I heard his voice call out softly, "Do you have a moment?" I hesitated, then walked into his office. He wasn't at his desk this time. Instead, he had pulled 2 chairs near the window, the city lights sparkling below like stars scattered across the earth. He motioned for me to sit. "I wanted to thank you again," he began, his tone thoughtful. "These past weeks, talking with you, being able to share without the weight of judgment, it's given me something I didn't even realize I was missing." I smiled gently. Sometimes all we need is someone to listen. He nodded, his gaze drifting to the glowing skyline. "It's strange. I've spent years building this image of strength, always being the one people come to for answers. But now, when I finally let myself be open, it feels freeing." His words resonated with me more than I expected. I thought about my own life, how often I had buried my emotions, choosing strength over vulnerability. Sitting there with him, I realized we weren't so different after all. We began to talk about things that had nothing to do with work. He told me about his love for old jazz records, how his father used to play them late into the night when he was a boy. I shared how I found peace in gardening, the way tending to something small and fragile reminded me that growth takes patience. The conversation flowed easily, as if we had known each other far longer than the roles we had played in the office. Yet beneath it all, there was a quiet tension, not of fear, not of impropriety, but of stepping into uncharted territory. We were both aware of the lines, yet both choosing to walk carefully along them. At one point, he leaned forward, his voice lower. "Do you ever feel like life just passes you by while you're busy holding everything together?" The question hit me deeply. I swallowed, my chest tightening with recognition. Yes. More than I'd like to admit. For a moment, we sat in silence, both staring out at the city below us, each lost in our own thoughts. The air between us was heavy with meaning, yet calm. There was no need to fill the quiet, it spoke louder than words ever could. Finally, he turned to me with an expression I'll never forget. His eyes weren't the eyes of a boss or a leader, but of a man stripped bare of titles and expectations. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost," he said quietly. "Hope." Those words sank deep into me. I hadn't realized until then that what we were building wasn't just a bond, it was a kind of healing. For him, for me, maybe even for both of us together. When I left that night, the cool evening air wrapped around me like a reminder that change was already happening, whether I was ready for it or not. I walked slower than usual, letting the city lights blur into the night sky, my thoughts swirling with questions. What did this mean for us? Where was this connection leading? Was it possible to be so close, yet still respectful of the boundaries we both knew existed? I didn't have the answers. But I knew one thing for certain, my boss's favor had grown into something neither of us had expected. It wasn't about one request anymore, it was about trust, about 2 people daring to let their guards down in a world that demanded masks. And as I drove home that night, the quiet hum of the car around me, I felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation. Because deep down, I knew the next step in this journey would change everything. The day that everything finally came to a head didn't arrive with any kind of warning. It wasn't stormy, it wasn't dramatic. In fact, it was an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind of day where the clock seemed to drag and the coffee didn't taste strong enough. Yet beneath that ordinary surface, something had been building for weeks, and it was ready to spill over. I was sitting at my desk, halfway through a report, when his door opened and he stepped out. His eyes searched the room until they found mine. No words were exchanged, just a small motion with his hand, inviting me in. I felt that now familiar quickening of my pulse as I rose and walked toward his office, closing the door gently behind me. This time, there was no preamble. He didn't stand by the window, and he didn't hide behind his desk. Instead, he sat at the small round table in the corner, papers neatly stacked to the side, as though he had cleared space for something more important. I joined him, my heart aware before my mind could catch up that this conversation would be different. "I can't keep pretending everything is fine," he said quietly, his voice carrying a tremor I had never heard before. "Not with you. You've seen too much now. You know too much." I held my breath, my hands folded tightly in my lap. He leaned forward, his expression raw. "When I asked you for that favor, I thought it was simple. I thought I just needed someone to listen, someone to remind me I wasn't alone. But what I didn't realize is how much I'd come to depend on you. You've become essential. And that scares me." His honesty pierced me. My own emotions, which I had carefully kept in check, rushed to the surface. I had felt it too, the way our connection had deepened, the way our conversations had become the highlight of my days. But hearing him say it aloud changed everything. "I'm scared too," I admitted, my voice softer than a whisper. "Because I never expected this. I never expected to matter to you in this way." For a long moment, we sat in silence, the weight of our words filling the room. Outside, the faint honking of cars drifted up from the street, a reminder that the world kept moving, unaware of the quiet storm inside this office. He finally broke the silence. "I don't want to cross lines we can't come back from. But I also don't want to go back to the way things were. I need to find a balance, a place where we can exist in this truth without destroying what we've built." I nodded, feeling the truth of it in my bones. This wasn't about reckless choices or breaking boundaries, it was about acknowledging the rare, unexpected connection between two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of places. "I don't have all the answers," I said carefully. "But I know this. What we've shared has already changed me. And I think, maybe it's supposed to." His eyes softened, and for the first time in weeks, I saw peace flicker across his face. Not complete peace, not the kind that solves everything, but the kind that comes from being truly understood. We talked for a long time that day, about how to move forward, how to carry this bond without letting it consume us. It wasn't easy. There were fears, doubts, and questions we couldn't fully answer. But there was also honesty, and in that honesty, a kind of freedom neither of us had known before. When I finally left his office, the sunlight had shifted, painting the room in a warm glow. I paused at the door, turning back to look at him. He gave me a small, steady nod, one that said everything words couldn't: gratitude, trust, and respect. Walking back through the halls, I realized how much I had grown through all of this. What began as a simple favor had become a journey of discovery about him, about myself, and about the power of connection when we least expect it. Life doesn't always give us neat, tidy stories. Sometimes it gives us complicated ones, filled with blurred lines and unexpected turns. But within those complications lie the lessons that stay with us forever. And as I stepped out into the afternoon air, I carried those lessons with me, knowing this experience would remain a part of me, shaping the way I understood trust, vulnerability, and the quiet strength of simply being there for someone when they need it most. That was the favor my boss asked of me. And though it shocked me at first, it turned into something far greater than either of us imagined, a reminder that we are never too strong, too important, or too old to need connection, and never too closed off to find it.